The James Webb Space Telescope just found a planet that looks like Earth, but something is terribly wrong. Its skies are filled with poison, its surface is melting, and what lives there may not be anything we'd recognize. Scientists believe evolution might have happened, but in the most twisted way possible. This planet didn't just fail, it mutated. What if life evolved into something we were never meant to find? Far away from Earth, beyond the moon, and past the shining rings of Saturn, a giant golden mirror floated in space. It was the James Webb Space Telescope. Silent and still, staring deep into the blackness. Its mirrors glowed like honey as it turned to face a little red star called LP 791-18. This star was small, dim, and quiet. Nothing about it seemed special at first. It was 90 light years away, which means even light, the fastest thing in the universe, would take 90 whole years to get from there to here. But that didn't stop the telescope. James Webb could see things that no eye could ever see. And when it looked at that star, it found something hiding beside it. A planet. The planet was small, only a bit bigger than Earth. It moved around the star in a tight, fast circle, completing a full trip every few days. That alone wasn't too strange. But what made scientists sit up straight was this. The planet had heat. Not a little. Not just warm, but hot, glowing heat coming from deep inside. It wasn't like Earth, where most of the heat comes from the sun. This planet was cooking from within. At first glance, it looked like it could be something wonderful. A rocky planet, the right size, not too close to its star and not too far. Maybe, just maybe, it could have life. The kind that swims in oceans or crawls on land. The kind that sees the sky and thinks. But the deeper the telescope looked, the stranger the planet became. It was covered in thick, dark clouds that never moved. They wrapped around the planet like a heavy blanket. James Webb studied the light passing through those clouds. It broke the light into pieces, like a rainbow, showing scientists what the clouds were made of. That's when they saw it. Carbon dioxide, sulfur, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. These are not gentle, life-loving gases. These are choking, burning, rotting gases. The air was not clean, it was poison. Hydrogen sulfide smells like rotten eggs here on Earth. But on this world, it filled the skies. There was no fresh breeze, no soft rain, only heavy, stinging clouds. Below them, the ground did not look solid. It shimmered, sharp and jagged. When the telescope measured how light bounced back, it wasn't the way it bounced off dirt or sand or stone. It looked like melted glass, maybe even metal. It meant the ground was hot, so hot that rocks may have turned into liquid. A place where the surface cracked, split, and oozed lava all the time. The planet's name was LP 79A1-18d. It had two neighbors, other planets in the same system. One of them passed very close. Again and again, this close pass pulled at our strange planet like a spoon spinning in thick soup. It didn't look like much, but the pull was strong enough to stretch the whole planet. That stretch and squeeze happened every time the bigger planet swung by, over and over like bending a metal rod until it burned in your hands. This squeezing made the inside of the planet boil, not from fire, but from pressure. On Earth, our moon pulls at the oceans and makes tides. On LP 791-18d, the pull is so strong it makes volcanoes burst. It's called tidal heating, and on this planet it never stops. Volcanoes shoot gas into the air. The crust breaks again and again, and that heat doesn't go away. It builds, it grows, it cooks. Some scientists think this kind of heating might help life start. Warmth, water, and energy can mix in strange, hopeful ways. Maybe long ago, life tried to begin on this planet. Tiny little cells might have swirled in dark puddles beneath the smoke, but they didn't last. The heat kept rising. The gas grew thick, and the air turned deadly. The same thing that helped life begin may have also wiped it out. James Webb couldn't see life. It couldn't see trees or fish or cities, but it could see signs. It could see patterns in light. It could measure heat. It could look for clues in how the planet moved and breathed. And everything it found pointed to one hard truth. Something had gone terribly wrong. This was not a peaceful world. This was not a place like Earth. It was a planet that hurt itself. A planet where heat never left. A planet where even the sky was dangerous. Something about that place felt broken. Something about it felt like a warning. And yet, it pulled us in. Scientists couldn't stop looking. They couldn't stop asking questions. So, what had happened there? What might still be happening now? Were there creatures down below the clouds, crawling through the heat and breathing the poison? Or was it just a graveyard of dreams? James Webb kept its eyes on the planet. Day after day, it watched. It recorded every flicker, every shadow, every twitch in the clouds. The data poured in, filling computers back on Earth. Scientists read the numbers and saw more than numbers. They saw a mystery. A planet that could have been like ours, but wasn't. A planet that followed a different path. A planet where evolution might have begun, but went somewhere no one ever imagined. That was the beginning, the start of the questions. The first moment when we realized this planet was not just another rock in space. It was a mirror, dark and warped, showing us a future we might not want to see. The air was thick. The ground was cracked. And far above, James Webb kept watching the world that almost was, and wondering what else it might still become. The planet spun slowly beneath its thick black clouds, turning through long nights and burning days. But even in the dark, it never truly rested. Its inside was always hot, always moving, always shaking. Deep down, something pushed and twisted, making the surface bulge and crack. This was no quiet world. It groaned, it boiled, it trembled like a living thing trying to hold itself together. The James Webb Space Telescope watched all of it, staring with eyes that never blinked. It saw the heat pouring out in waves. It saw gas rising like smoke from an invisible fire. And the more it watched, the more it understood that this planet was in pain. The planet's name, LP 791-18D, sounded simple. But its story was not. It moved in a small circle around a red dwarf star, just 0.09 times the size of our sun. The star gave off only a faint red glow, not much brighter than a campfire in the night. But this small star was enough to keep the planet warm. Warm, but not too hot. Not at first. Its orbit placed it close enough to the star to keep it from freezing, but not so close that it should have burned. In a perfect world, that balance would have been just right. In this world, it was not. Another planet, LP 791-18C, orbited nearby. It was bigger, heavier, and every time it passed close to LP 791-18D, it pulled on it. Hard. It pulled the same way the moon pulls Earth's oceans, but this pull was much stronger. Instead of making tides, it squeezed the whole planet like a soft ball. The planet stretched and snapped back again and again. That constant motion made its insides heat up. The heat had nowhere to go but out. So it rose. It cracked the crust. It bubbled into the sky. And it never stopped. That heat changed everything. It made volcanoes grow tall and angry. It made lava rivers that never cooled. It made the ground brittle and sharp, with glassy stones that glowed orange at the edges. The ground was always shifting, always breaking. Whole chunks of land sank or tilted as new ones rose up behind them. There were no forests, no rivers, no oceans, only rock, steam, and fire. And above it all, the sky hung heavy and gray, filled with strange gases. James Webb could not touch the surface. It could not smell the air or feel the heat. But it could see. It saw carbon dioxide thick in the clouds. It saw methane and sulfur too. The worst was hydrogen sulfide. That gas meant death. It meant decay. It was the breath of volcanoes and the last breath of living things. On Earth, only the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean hold life that can survive in such poison. But on this planet, it filled the whole sky. Still, there were clues that something strange had happened here. The way the light bent told a quiet story. Scientists saw patterns that didn't match any normal planet. They saw heat rising from places it shouldn't. They saw reflections that danced like light off a smooth black lake. But there were no lakes, only pits of liquid rock and seas of ash. In the distance, mountains smoked and spat glowing dust into the wind. It was like Earth, but turned inside out. Some scientists wondered, could life have started here? Was it possible that, long ago, this planet had calm skies and cooler ground? Could small, simple cells have once floated in warm pools between the rocks? It wasn't a silly question. On Earth, life may have begun in places just like that. Deep under the sea, where black smoke pours from cracks in the ground, strange creatures still live today. Worms with no eyes, bacteria that eat metal. If they can live there, maybe something once lived here too. But if life began, it didn't last long. The heat kept growing. The gases thickened. The sky darkened. The clouds stopped rain from falling. The sun's weak light couldn't break through. And still, the other planet kept pulling, making the ground shake and the lava flow. What began as a chance for life became a trap. The planet was caught in a loop, always heating, always breaking, never healing. Then something new happened. James Webb caught a flicker of light. Tiny, faint, but real. It moved across the surface in a way that light shouldn't move. It wasn't from the star, it wasn't from lava. It was too fast, too sharp. It looked like something had reflected light for just a second, then vanished. A trick? Maybe. A sensor glitch? Maybe. But scientists saw it again the next day, and again, a week later, always in the same place, always in the same odd pattern. Could something still be alive down there? Could evolution have found a way to survive? Maybe life didn't die, maybe it changed, maybe it twisted to fit this new, angry world. On Earth, life always finds a way to adapt. In deserts, in ice, in fire. Maybe this planet forced life to become something completely different. Something that doesn't need water or sunlight. Something that breathes gas and eats heat. If so, what would that life look like? Would it crawl or float? Would it think? Would it care? The scientists didn't know. They had only light and numbers, but the numbers were strange. They showed pulses of heat in even patterns, not random. Not like volcanoes, almost like signals. Like something was moving on purpose. More questions filled their minds. Why did the planet heat up so fast? Why were the gases so thick and deadly? Why did the light move in ways they couldn't explain? And if life had really changed that much, was it still life at all? Or was it something new? LP 79118D didn't answer. It just kept spinning, wrapped in its smoke. The clouds moved slowly. The surface bubbled. The air shimmered. But deep inside, something else might have been stirring, watching, waiting. Or maybe not. Maybe the light was just light, the heat just heat, and the planet truly empty. But even if it was empty now, it hadn't always been. That was clear. Something happened here. And whatever it was, it had gone horribly wrong. The planet turned slowly beneath its thick clouds, spinning in silence while the star above glowed dim red. LP 7911-18D was not dead. It was active. Very active. But something about it still felt wrong. Scientists watched the heat moving across the surface. The patterns weren't normal. Lava lakes bubbled in strange shapes. Bright spots flared, then faded, but always came back. And in between them, there were cold patches, darker than anything around them. These cold areas didn't match any volcano, any crater, or any natural formation they had ever seen. They looked too smooth, too flat, too perfect, almost like someone had made them. The telescope couldn't see details. It couldn't zoom in far enough to spot trees or buildings or even rocks, but it could track heat. It could watch the way the light shifted across the planet. And over time, something strange became clear. The hot zones didn't move with the sun. They moved in loops, circling each other, pulsing in a slow beat, like a pattern. Heat came in flashes, always at the same time, always in the same place. On Earth, heat like this comes from machines, from factories, from power plants. But there were no machines here, at least none anyone could see. That's when scientists began to ask a deeper question. What if this planet had changed not by accident, but by choice? What if something had caused the heat, not a natural process, but a result of action? Could it be that life on this world had evolved not into soft creatures, but into systems? Could intelligence have taken a different form entirely? One that didn't need plants or bones or water? What if it had become the heat itself? On Earth, all life needs energy. We burn food, or sunlight, or chemicals to keep our cells alive. But what if a different kind of life evolved here? One that fed on lava, drank sulfur, and lived in clouds of gas. The planet was full of energy. Its belly boiled constantly. Maybe life didn't need oceans. Maybe it grew out of the fire. The idea wasn't new. Scientists on Earth had studied strange things called extremophiles, tiny creatures that live in boiling vents, freezing ice, or pools of acid. Some don't even need sunlight. They eat metal, or rock, or the gases from deep inside the Earth. On this planet, maybe life started as something like that, but then the planet kept getting hotter. The air kept getting thicker. The ground cracked open more often. Everything normal began to die. But maybe one kind of life didn't die. Maybe it adapted. Maybe it became something new. James Webb picked up signals from deep in the planet's atmosphere. They weren't sounds or messages, but changes. Sharp spikes in gas levels that came and went too quickly to be natural. The clouds pulsed, then paused. The gases rose, then dropped. It was like someone was turning invisible switches on and off. One moment, the air was full of methane. The next, it was gone. Then it returned. Then it changed again. The planet seemed to be breathing, but not in a normal way. This breath had rhythm, purpose, control. Other patterns began to appear. The winds spun in circles. Tight, fast circles that stayed in place instead of drifting across the world. These wind cells were strange. They didn't behave like storms. They didn't grow or die like weather. They stayed locked over certain places, like they were guarding something underneath. And within these storms, the heat was always the highest. The gases were always thickest, and the cold, dark spots stayed quiet. Scientists called them the cores. They counted 7 of them around the planet, each one about the size of a large city, each one perfectly spaced from the next. The chances of that happening by accident were almost zero. It looked like a pattern, a network, a system. Could it be a mistake? Maybe. Could it be a trick of the data? Always possible. But the pattern held up over weeks and months. The cores didn't move. The pulses didn't stop. The planet kept spinning, and the systems kept working. The surface was cracked and broken, but something inside was stable, organized, like a mind hidden inside a storm. The more scientists looked, the more they felt uneasy. It wasn't just the patterns, it was the timing. Some of the pulses matched the planet's orbit. Others followed the movement of the nearby planet, LP 791-18C. It was as if the planet was reacting to its neighbor, like a creature watching something pass too close. The core pulses grew stronger when the other planet came near, and when it left, they went silent again. Was the planet aware? That was too big a question to answer. But something was active. Something was responding. Something was behaving in a way no volcano, no storm, no natural gas flow ever had. And still, the cold spots remained. Large, dark, quiet. Scientists pointed other telescopes at the system. They measured radiation, magnetism, and light. The data was thin, but it told the same story. Something was down there. Something that had survived or adapted or emerged from fire and heat. Something that didn't look like life, but acted like it. They built computer models to test the idea. If the planet had once been calm and slowly became this violent place, how long would it take for simple life to evolve into something new? The numbers were shocking. On Earth, evolution takes millions of years. But on this planet, with its fast orbit and constant pressure, change could come quicker. Heat drives reaction, stress drives mutation, time moves differently in fire. Maybe life here didn't crawl or walk. Maybe it grew like a storm, fast and wild, learning through heat instead of genes. That night, James Webb caught another flicker, this time from the edge of one of the dark zones. It wasn't just heat. It was light, sharp, narrow, focused, a straight line, too smooth to be natural. It lasted only 2 seconds. Then it vanished. It was probably nothing. A trick, a glitch, a flash of lava bouncing off a stone. That's what they told themselves. But still, no one turned away. Because what if it wasn't nothing? What if it was a signal? What if buried under fire, gas, and cloud, something had seen us watching and flickered back? Far beneath the thick clouds, the planet glowed with soft red light. The heat never stopped. It rose from cracks in the ground and drifted into the dark sky, warming the poison air. It moved in steady waves, like the breathing of something large and buried. The crust of the planet, black and broken, stretched across the horizon in long lines of dried lava. No rivers, no forests, only ridges, pits, and wide plains of glass-like stone. Everything shimmered, everything burned, but not with flames, with heat, quiet, endless heat that lived in the bones of the world. Scientists had mapped the cores, 7 of them, each one as wide as a city, each one pulsing with strange heat. They stayed still while the clouds above swirled in thick circles, trapping the gases underneath. The rest of the planet cracked and shifted, but the cores did not move. They held steady, as if anchored deep in the crust. When James Webb watched them, it saw something odd. The cores blinked. Not like lights, but like heartbeats. Not all at once. Each one followed the next, like stepping stones lighting up in the dark. Left to right, then right to left, then back again. Every blink was 5 minutes apart. Always 5. Never 6. Never 4. On Earth, machines do this. Machines blink. Machines follow timers. Machines remember patterns. But this planet had no machines, or so it seemed. The surface showed no metal, no wires, no structures, just heat and dust. But heat was enough. If something lived here, maybe it didn't need steel or circuits. Maybe it used heat the way we use hands. One night, the pulses changed. They doubled in speed. 2.5 minutes between flashes. A rush of gas followed, rising from each core in a perfect spiral. Methane, sulfur, hydrogen sulfide. The clouds thickened, but the blinking still shone through. The new speed lasted for 2 hours, then stopped. Everything went still again. But scientists had seen it, and they wondered, was it a test? A reset? A sign? They began to study the planet's past. They looked at old data from before James Webb. They searched for clues in old sky surveys. And in one blurry image, taken 20 years ago by a small space telescope, they saw something strange. A flicker, a flash, in the same place where Core 4 sits now. It was weak, barely more than a smudge, but it was there, and it pulsed just once, then never again, until now. What if the cores had been quiet for centuries or longer? What if they had only just begun to wake up? The ground near each core gave off less heat than the space around it. That was strange. On Earth, volcanoes are hottest at the center, but here, the centers were cooler, almost like they were pulling heat in, not pushing it out, like they were collecting, storing, charging. The gases, too, showed strange signs. Normal volcano gas spread slowly, but these gases moved fast. They shot straight up in thin columns, then spread flat like pancakes. The air split into clean layers, gas on gas like cake frosting. And in the layers, scientists saw something new. a thin streak of a rare element called vanadium. On Earth, vanadium is used in steel, in batteries, in strong tools. But here, it floated in the sky, layered between sulfur and carbon dioxide, and only near the cores. Nowhere else. What was it doing there? Some said it was natural. Maybe the crust was full of it. Maybe it was just a side effect of all the heat. But vanadium doesn't rise easily. It sinks. And yet, here it was, floating. And then came the shadows. James Webb caught them first. Thin, dark lines that moved across the clouds. Not smoke, not dust. Shadows. They moved in ways the wind could not explain. Straight lines. Slow turns. Each one traced the sky above a core. No flapping, no drifting, just movement. Measured. Exact. The shadows didn't last long. 10 seconds. Maybe 12. Then gone. But they returned the next night. And the night after that. Always in the same order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each one over its core. Each one the same size. About 300 meters long. About 30 meters wide. Flat. Sharp shapes that changed nothing below, only darkened the clouds as they passed. Could they be ships? No one knew. There were no lights, no engines, no radio signals, just shadows, silent and slow, like leaves sliding across a pond. Some scientists tried to explain them. Maybe they were cloud formations. Maybe they were tricks of light. Maybe the wind was playing games with the gas. But others weren't so sure. The timing was too clean. The shapes were too even. The reappearance was too exact. And then the blinking stopped. For 5 days, the cores went dark. No pulses, no flares, no change in gas, just silence. The clouds still moved. The shadows still came. But the cores, quiet, until day 6. Without warning, all 7 cores blinked at once, just one flash. A bright, burning wave of heat that shot through the clouds and into space. James Webb's sensors flared red. The heat spike was massive, hotter than any volcano ever recorded on Earth. Then, darkness again. After that, everything slowed. The storms grew smaller. The gases thinned. The ground cooled just a little. The planet, for the first time, seemed to be resting, not healing, but breathing softer, like it had finished something. But finished what? That's when James Webb noticed the orbit. It had changed. Just a little. A shift of less than 0.5%. But that was enough. Something had pushed the planet, nudged it, like a boat on a lake. No meteor had hit. No moon had passed. Only that flash. That one moment of fire. And then, motion. Was it a launch? A defense? A signal? No one could say. But Earth kept watching. Because this planet, this broken, burning world, wasn't just reacting anymore. It was acting. The planet drifted on, spinning through the deep black of space, wrapped in its heavy sky. But something had changed. The clouds still swirled in slow storms, and the ground still steamed with trapped heat, but the pattern, the rhythm of the planet, was no longer the same. It was quieter now. Not still, not dead, but different. The blinking from the 7 cores had stopped. The strange gas pulses had faded. The shadows above the clouds were still there. But they had slowed too. Now they moved just once a day, as if resting or watching. Earth scientists waited. They stared at the new silence and wondered if it was peace or preparation. The James Webb Space Telescope kept its mirrors locked on the planet. The infrared sensors glowed softly, watching for any sign of change. For days, there was nothing. Just the usual dark, the usual heat, the same thick layers of gas curling around the planet like blankets made of smoke. But then, on the 6th day, something happened. A flicker, not in the sky, not in the clouds, but in the dark side of the planet, where no starlight touched. James Webb caught it for less than 1 second. A tiny spike in light, pure, sharp, and focused. It wasn't like the other pulses. This one was fast, like a flash from a mirror. It came from the side of the planet facing away from the star, in a place no light should reach. But it happened. It was real. It wasn't heat, and it wasn't gas. It was light. Back on Earth, the scientists ran the data again and again. The numbers matched every time. It wasn't random. It came from a very specific spot, just beyond Core 5. But that spot wasn't just empty land. It was part of a flat, wide region scientists had nicknamed the shelf. The shelf was strange, perfectly level, almost too perfect. For hundreds of kilometers, the land there showed no rise, no fall, no cracks. Just one smooth sheet of dark, glassy rock. On Earth, only water or machines could make ground that flat. But there were no oceans here, and no known machines. The light came again 2 days later. Same time, same place, same shape. But this time it lasted longer. 3 seconds, then 6, then gone. Scientists added filters, enhanced the image, and found something else. The flash was moving. It wasn't just one light. It was several, traveling in a line, about 200 meters apart. Each one blinked on, then off, like a signal or a code. Could this be life? Could it be intelligence? No one could answer. But the signs were growing stronger. Too many patterns. Too many rules. Nature is messy. It makes shapes. But it doesn't repeat them like this. It doesn't time flashes to match orbital turns. It doesn't lay out flat rock fields that stretch longer than cities. The data from the shelf kept coming in. The ground stayed cool, cooler than the areas around it. That didn't make sense. The whole planet was heating from the inside, yet here was this place, quiet and cold. And that wasn't all. There was a shape buried just beneath the surface. Radar waves from earlier scans had bounced off something. A long, curved outline under the rock, over 2 kilometers wide, half a kilometer tall. The signal was faint, but it was real. Not a hill, not a cave, a structure. But what kind of structure survives lava and gas and time? More flashes came the next week. They now moved in pairs, racing across the shelf like runners in a relay. Each pair blinked twice, then vanished. 4 days later, another set did the same, but in the opposite direction. The same timing, the same spacing, and all of it perfectly lined up with the slow orbit of the planet. Back on Earth, whispers grew louder. What if these were not accidents? What if something under the shelf was alive? Not with eyes or lungs or hands, but alive in another way. Alive in patterns, alive in pulses, alive in stone and light. Some scientists built models. If a civilization had once lived here, how would they survive the planet turning violent? What would they build? What would they leave behind? The models showed the same answer again and again. Underground systems, powered by heat, hidden beneath stone, protected by flat, shielded ground. A perfect shelf. But why the flashes? That question burned louder than all the rest. Were they messages? Warnings? Echoes of something old trying to be remembered? Or were they tools, just machines doing what they were made to do, long after their makers were gone? Then, something strange happened. On the 14th day, right before the planet's orbit reached its closest point to the other planet, LP 791-18C, the shelf pulsed again. But this time, it wasn't light. It was heat. A wave of warmth swept across the rock. Not fire, not lava, just a soft rise in temperature, barely 5 degrees. It spread out in a perfect ring, like a ripple in water. And at the center of the ripple was the buried shape, the structure, the signal. James Webb recorded it all. Scientists measured it down to the second. The ripple lasted 8 minutes. Then, like before, the shelf went cold again. The clouds above it thinned. The sky cleared just enough to see stars behind it. The shelf, once hidden under darkness, was now in full view. And on that smooth, dark rock, something had changed. A mark, only a few meters wide. barely a scratch compared to the size of the shelf, but visible, a line, perfectly straight, running from one side of the shelf to the other. It wasn't there before. They checked the images. They compared every map. The line was new. It wasn't lava. It wasn't a crack. It was too narrow, too sharp. It had shape, purpose. Someone, or something, had drawn it. The silence of the planet now felt louder than ever. The clouds swirled, but didn't roar. The ground steamed, but didn't shake. The shadows above the cores drifted slower. Even the pulses of gas had stopped. The planet wasn't just changing anymore. It was watching, and for the first time, it had made a move. The line across the shelf stayed sharp and clear, like a scar carved into glass. It cut across the dark ground with perfect straightness, almost too perfect. James Webb kept watching, sending back images in silent bursts. The more scientists studied them, the more questions grew. The shelf wasn't just a piece of ground anymore. It was acting like something alive, something that could respond, and now it had responded in the only way it could, with a mark. Each day, the planet turned, showing its face to the red dwarf star, and then hiding it again in long shadows. Each time the shelf returned into view, the line was still there, unchanged. But now, it was glowing. Not bright like fire or lightning, but a soft, deep orange glow that barely lifted above the surface. It wasn't heat, at least, not the kind James Webb usually measured. It was something else. A glow that came without burning, like a memory rising from stone. The glow didn't spread. It stayed locked inside the line. A single glowing thread stretched across the shelf's black skin. At night, it became easier to see. Against the darkness of space, the line stood out like a line of fireflies, standing perfectly still. But this was no accident of nature. Nature didn't draw straight. Nature didn't mark stone with silent fire. Scientists argued over what it meant. Some said it was a message, though no one knew how to read it. Others said it was a sign, a countdown, a warning, or maybe even a test. A few began to believe something deep under the shelf had woken up. Not a being, not a person, but a system, a mind built from heat and stone, still working after millions of years. More strange things began to happen. The cold spots around the planet, the places where the seven cores had been pulsing, started to shrink. One by one, they faded, their dark shapes swallowed by waves of rising heat. But it wasn't chaos. It was order, a plan. Heat was now moving in wide, slow circles, spreading outward from the shelf, not randomly, but with direction, with balance. The planet wasn't just hot, it was organizing. Gas levels began to shift too. Methane levels dropped. Hydrogen sulfide fell next. Only carbon dioxide remained high, floating like thick syrup in the upper sky. That change was strange, very strange. On Earth, these gases come from deep underground, or from things that are dying. But here, it looked like the gases were being managed, controlled, as if something on the planet didn't want to be hidden anymore. Then came the sound. James Webb couldn't hear in the way humans do, but its sensors could detect waves, tiny ripples moving through the gas and light. For weeks, those waves had been quiet. But on the seventh day after the shelf lit up, a new pattern appeared. A vibration, low, repeating, almost like a heartbeat stretched thin. It moved across the upper clouds, bouncing from core to core. One wave every 6 minutes, a perfect loop, over and over. That wasn't natural. Not in air that thick. Not in gas that heavy. Something was making the planet hum. Back on Earth, the data piled higher. Scientists broke it down, turned it into maps, turned those maps into sounds. They played the patterns out loud. What they heard made the room go still. It wasn't just a tone, it was rising and falling. Up, then down. Pausing, then starting again. It was a shape made of sound. A slow, repeating spiral. And the rhythm matched the glow from the shelf. Every 6 minutes, the line on the planet brightened. And every 6 minutes, the sound grew louder in the data. They were in sync, light and tone, glow and hum, together. One scientist whispered, "It's calling." Others weren't so sure. Maybe it was a machine stuck in a loop. Maybe it was an accident, something left running with no one left to stop it. But it didn't feel like an accident. The shelf had waited for millions of years, and now it was speaking. Why now? James Webb couldn't answer, but it kept watching. On the eighth day, something new happened. A small patch of the shelf, just to the west of the glowing line, shifted. Not much, just a rise of a few centimeters. But it moved, slowly, like a lid lifting. The movement lasted only 12 seconds. Then it froze, but the shape it made remained. A rectangle, flat, clean-edged, 200 meters wide, exactly the size of the blinking lights from earlier. The next day, another patch lifted. Same size, same shape, same soft motion. 14 seconds, then still. Each day, another piece rose. By the end of the week, 7 rectangles had lifted from the shelf, each one placed beside the glowing line. Together, they formed a larger shape, a wide arc that bent around the center of the shelf like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be finished. From above, it looked like an eye, and in the middle, the lines still glowed. That was when Earth began to ask a harder question. Not just, is something alive down there, but something else. Was it watching us? Was it aware? James Webb wasn't the only eye in the sky. Other telescopes had joined in. Even smaller instruments on Earth, despite the distance, could feel tiny parts of the signal. And what they saw, what they felt, was this. The planet had seen them. Because on the 9th day, the hum changed. Instead of one pulse every 6 minutes, there were 2, then 3, then 4. And with each new pulse, the rectangles on the shelf brightened. The glow from the line deepened to a red-gold color. The gas above the planet thinned just enough to let more light escape. The cloud cover, once so thick, opened into small holes. And through those holes, the shelf shined like a beacon. The planet wasn't just calling out. It was answering. The planet had changed. It was no longer just a place of fire and gas. It was something more now, something aware, something active. Every day, the line on the shelf glowed brighter. The rectangles beside it stayed raised, like open lids waiting for something to rise from underneath. The clouds above no longer blocked everything. They swirled in slow circles around the shelf, like giant rings of smoke. The air there was clearing, piece by piece. What had once been hidden was now becoming visible. The James Webb Space Telescope kept sending back images, its golden mirrors locked onto the planet like eyes that refused to blink. The light from the shelf now pulsed in exact rhythm, 6 times per hour, then 7, then 8. Each time, the glow reached a deeper red, like heated metal ready to bend. But nothing broke. Nothing spilled. The heat stayed calm, quiet, focused, and something else began to happen. The gas around the planet, once thick with methane and sulfur, began to twist into shapes. Not random swirls, but long spirals that looped from one hemisphere to the other. These spirals weren't normal weather. They didn't spin like storms or rise like smoke. They moved with direction, crossing over the cores, linking them like thread pulled through cloth. From above, it looked like a giant circuit being drawn in the air. Each core, once silent, now had its own tiny pattern again, but not the old blinking. This was slower, smoother, a soft shimmer of warmth every 22 minutes. Not bright enough to shine through the clouds, but strong enough to read in the sensors. The planet wasn't just waking up, it was reconnecting its pieces, linking its centers, lighting its grid. And then the shadows returned. For many days, they had disappeared. Those long, flat shapes that had passed above the clouds like gliding rafts. But now they were back, and they moved in new ways. Each one followed the spiral winds, tracing the paths that wrapped around the planet. But this time, they didn't drift. They hovered. Each shadow paused above a core, stopped, and then began to spin. Slowly, just once. A wide turn in the sky. Then they moved on, heading toward the shelf. When they reached the shelf, they didn't leave. One by one, they stopped above the glowing line, their long dark forms settling into place like puzzle pieces in the air. 7 shadows, 7 cores, 7 lights, and still, the planet pulsed. That was when Earth made a discovery. Scientists analyzing the signals noticed something strange in the timing. The pulses of light, the spirals of gas, the shadows, all of them were moving faster now, but not in random steps. They followed a pattern, one that matched something familiar: the orbits of Earth's own satellites. The pulse intervals were exact copies of Earth's artificial timing systems, not in scale, but in rhythm. The planet was not just flashing, it was mirroring us. For every pattern Earth sent into space, the planet sent one back. A light, a shadow, a sound wave, not copied, but changed, shifted slightly, like an echo that wanted to speak back. Could this be a signal? Could it be trying to talk? The idea spread quickly across Earth. News stations picked up the story. People looked up at the night sky, wondering if that little red star, so far away, now held something that knew they were watching. Telescopes everywhere turned toward LP 79D118D. New instruments were pointed at it. More data came in, and the patterns grew clearer. They weren't random. They weren't noise. They were something more. A group of scientists ran the pulse rhythms through a language decoding system, the kind used to study animal sounds or lost ancient writing. The results were strange. The system didn't find letters or words, but it did find structure: repeats, endings, breaks. The pulses were being grouped in sets of 5, then paused, then another 5. It wasn't music. It wasn't math. But it was language shaped. And then came the burst. It happened on the 15th day. A massive flash, not just from the shelf, but from every core at once. Heat burst out in straight beams, narrow and tall, reaching into space. The sensors glowed white. The beams lasted 10 seconds, then gone. Nothing exploded. Nothing melted. But after the beams faded, everything changed. The shelf was no longer just glowing. It was moving. The 7 rectangles slowly began to lower again, sliding back into the ground as if their task was done. The glowing line dimmed to a dull red. The clouds above it thickened again. And then came the shape. A single piece of the shelf near the center began to rise. Not a rectangle, not a crack, but a form. Tall, thin, smooth. It climbed upward slowly, like a tower growing out of the stone. It kept rising. 50 meters, 100, 200. It stopped at 300 meters. From orbit, it looked like a needle piercing the sky. It did not blink. It did not glow. It simply stood. James Webb caught every second. Back on Earth, the tower was scanned from every direction. It was thin at the top, wide at the base, with perfectly flat sides. But its surface didn't reflect normal light. It swallowed it. Even the brightest wavelengths vanished into the tower's skin. Not black. Not metal. Something else. Something unknown. For 2 days, it stood still. Then, the top lit up. Not with light, but with shape. Lines began to form near the tip of the tower, circles and arcs etched in glowing red. They spun slowly around the surface, like a story being written. The lines moved downward, layer by layer, carving a spiral of symbols around the tower's side. No one could read them. They weren't letters. They weren't numbers. But they moved like meaning, like purpose. And once the spiral reached the base, it stopped. Then, the clouds closed in. The storms returned, and the planet grew quiet again. But this time, Earth didn't feel like it had been watching something dead. This time, it felt like the planet had spoken. And now, it was waiting for us to reply. The clouds thickened like smoke across the sky, curling in wide rings over the planet's surface. The shelf was hidden now, covered again in swirling gas, as if it had pulled a blanket over itself to sleep. The glowing line had gone dark. The 7 rectangles had sunk back into the ground. And the tower, tall and sharp as a blade, no longer spun its symbols. The red lights had faded. The lines were still there, etched into the side, but no longer moving. The planet was quiet again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. James Webb stayed locked on the surface, searching through the clouds with its eyes of heat and light. For days it saw nothing new. No pulses, no flashes, no spirals of gas. It was as if the planet had turned away, but Earth couldn't stop watching. Something had happened. Something big. The beams of fire, the tower rising, the moving lights, the rhythms matching Earth's own machines. Too many signs, too many perfect lines for it to be chance. Scientists began building new models. They charted the pulses and the patterns, laying them over each other like puzzle pieces. One group noticed something strange. The symbols on the tower weren't random. They followed a sequence, a spiral that began with a wide curve, then narrowed as it reached the base. Each band of symbols had the same number of loops: 7, 7 cores, 7 shadows, 7 raised plates. The number kept returning. They ran the shapes through decoding software. Not letters, but geometry. Ratios, angles, and hidden in the curves, they found something shocking: a match. One of the loops on the tower's midsection was a near-perfect copy of the orbital path of Earth's moon. Not exact, but close enough to notice. That alone might be coincidence. But the next symbol curve? It matched the orbit of Earth's satellites in geosynchronous path, 35,186 kilometers high. Again, not perfect, but too close to ignore. The planet wasn't just talking, it was talking about us. Each spiral seemed to show not just shapes from its own sky, but from ours, and not just the present. Some of the lines, some of the deepest cuts near the base of the tower, matched orbital paths Earth hadn't used in decades. Old orbits. From the early days of satellites. From before humans had even landed on the moon. How could this planet know? James Webb couldn't look away. Day after day, it tracked every tiny change in the clouds. The shelf stayed quiet, but the rest of the planet began to warm again. The cores lit slowly, each one pushing a soft breath of heat into the sky, like fire trying to remember how to burn. The shadow ships were gone, but something else replaced them. Tiny flashes, just outside the upper edge of the atmosphere. Not large, not fast, but bright, like sparks rising from the surface and burning out before they could reach space. These flashes always came in pairs. One flash, then another, then nothing for 20 minutes. Then again, always near the equator, always from the same 2 points on opposite sides of the planet. Launches? Messages? Some said yes, others said no, but all agreed. The planet was doing something. The gas over the cores shifted again. The air was thinning just slightly, as if being pulled down into the ground. Not out into space, not leaking, but drawn in, as if the planet was breathing in. Not air, but data, signals, patterns. The pulses started again, fainter than before, but faster. Not the long, wide beats of earlier. These were sharp, short, less than 1 second long, but steady. Every 4 minutes. One from core 3, then another from core 6, then 1, then 7. The order changed every time, but the space between never did. 4 minutes. Always 4. The tower stayed still, but the pulses were coming from under it now. James Webb caught something new. A tiny heat path connecting the tower's base to core 3. It was thin, barely a few meters wide, but it moved with direction. Heat doesn't usually do that. It spreads. This moved like a wire. That was when Earth decided to try something different. A team of scientists sent a signal, not a message. Just a short radio wave aimed directly at the planet. A pulse of energy shaped to match the planet's own rhythms. 4 minutes. 7 points. A mirror of the last pattern. They sent it once, then again, then a third time. Then they waited. Nothing happened for 2 days. But on the third day, the tower lit up. Just the tip. Just for 5 seconds. Then darkness. But the next day, it lit up again. This time for 10 seconds. Then 20. Then 40. Each time, it doubled. After 5 days, it stayed lit for over 5 minutes. Then it flashed once, bright, red, sharp, then went dark. The pulses from the cores stopped. The heat path faded, and the shelf fell silent again. But the message had been sent, and the planet had answered. Now Earth was left with the biggest question of all. Was this planet trying to communicate or trying to remember? The sky above the planet was quiet again, filled with thick clouds that twisted slowly like fog in a cave. The heat had dropped just a little, but the core spots still glowed faintly. The shelf was hidden now, no longer lit with red or gold, and the tower stood like a dark spike in the middle of it all. It didn't move. It didn't shine, but every now and then, something shifted around it. Tiny waves of heat, like air moving across warm stone. The planet felt paused, like it was waiting. Back on Earth, the scientists stayed locked on their screens. The signal they had sent had been answered, and that answer had changed everything. The tower had blinked, the pulses had stopped, and then came the silence. But even in the silence, things were moving. Not fast, not loud, but deep. The gas levels had shifted again. Not across the whole planet, but in two strange places, one near the North Pole and one near the South. In those zones, the cloud cover had thinned into wide rings, and inside, each ring was a single shape, not lines, not light, but holes, perfect circles, one in the north, one in the south, each about 50 kilometers wide, too large to be a crater, too smooth to be broken ground. They weren't glowing, they weren't hot, they just were. Circles where the ground had dipped inward, flat black bowls made of the same glassy rock as the shelf. James Webb scanned them closely. The surfaces weren't cracked. There were no hills, no debris, no change in color. But inside each bowl, a thin beam of heat rose straight up. Not strong, not fast, just steady. The beams didn't flicker or move. They stayed the same all day, all night. Narrow and clean, like invisible ropes tied to the sky. What were they? On Earth? One team noticed something strange. The bowls weren't new. They had been there all along, hidden under the thickest parts of the clouds. Early images from James Webb hadn't picked them up clearly. But now, with the air thinned just enough, they could be seen. And they were exactly opposite each other. One at the top of the planet, one at the bottom. A straight line between them would go right through the planet's center. Was it a signal path? A kind of energy loop? No one knew. But the most chilling part wasn't the shape or the heat. It was what was missing. Sound. In every part of the planet, sensors picked up low rumblings, heat waves, chemical reactions, echoes of gas. But inside the bowls, there was none. Not even the normal hum of the atmosphere. The signal dropped to zero, like something was swallowing every bit of energy that touched the surface. Some said it was a gate. Others said it was a trap. But one idea rose above the rest. A memory vault. A place where something was stored, sealed, waiting. Scientists pointed back to the tower, the spirals on its surface, the timing of the lights, the pulses that mirrored Earth. What if it wasn't just watching? What if it was learning? Or worse, remembering? Maybe the tower didn't send out new information. Maybe it was pulling in old things. Maybe it was reactivating pieces of itself. Slowly, carefully, like someone waking up and trying to remember who they are. And the two bowls. They might be the final pieces. The theory spread fast. The planet, once thought to be a lifeless rock with broken weather, now looked like something that had built itself into the ground. Not cities, not machines, but memory, intelligence pressed into stone. Systems that could wait. Systems that could wake. But why wake now? What had changed? The answer might be the beams, the ones Earth had sent, the tiny pulse patterns that were meant as a hello, nothing more. But maybe, to this planet, they weren't new. Maybe they were familiar. If long ago this place had reached for the stars, if something had once lived here and touched the sky, it might have left behind a signal, a rhythm, a language, buried, forgotten. And when James Webb watched and Earth answered, the planet recognized the signal, not as something new, but something lost. The vault theory grew stronger. One scientist called the planet a broken brain made of fire. Another called it a library with locks made of lava. But the idea was the same. Something built to last, built to hide, and now built to rise. James Webb caught another change. On the sixth day after the tower's last flash, the core pulses started again. Not all at once, not fast, just a single warm shimmer from core 2. Then hours later, one from core 5. They were slower now, less steady, like someone testing their voice after a long sleep. And then, for the first time in many weeks, the clouds parted. Not all the way, just a small hole above the shelf. And through that hole, light poured in from the red star. The shelf shimmered faintly, and the tower woke up again. One small pulse of light at the top, then a line of red crawling slowly down its side. But this time, the spirals weren't the same. They twisted downward, but stopped before reaching the bottom. And at the very end, one small symbol appeared. A shape Earth had seen before. A triangle. But not just any triangle. It matched the path of an Earth satellite, one launched nearly 60 years ago. A forgotten science satellite from the early days of space travel. The odds of this match being a mistake were almost zero. The planet had remembered it. This wasn't just communication anymore. It was recognition. And maybe reconstruction. Whatever had happened on this world long ago, it wasn't gone. It was waiting. And now, piece by piece, it was putting itself back together. The triangle symbol stayed glowing on the tower, sharp and steady. It sat just above the base like a stamp carved into stone. For a long time, it didn't move. But above it, the older spiral symbols began to fade, one by one, peeling back up the tower like lines made of dust. Only the triangle remained, lit with a soft red glow. James Webb recorded every second, its golden mirrors pointed at the dark surface below. The sky was still thick, the clouds wrapped tightly around the planet, but the area over the shelf stayed clear, like something inside was keeping it open. Back on Earth, the scientists were still studying the match. The triangle wasn't just a random shape. It was a near-perfect copy of the flight path taken by Explorer 8, a satellite launched in 1960 to study Earth's upper atmosphere. A long-dead mission, a forgotten orbit. Yet here it was again, marked on a planet 90 light-years away. The odds were too low to ignore. This wasn't a guess. It was chosen. The planet had shown Earth something it remembered. Not from its own sky, but from ours. Why? Some believed this was proof that something from Earth had reached this planet long ago. Maybe a signal sent in the early days of space travel. Maybe even an old probe that flew too far. Others thought it meant the opposite, that something from this planet had come to us, that the triangle was not a memory of what we sent, but a mark of where they had been. Then came the light. It started in the northern bowl, a soft red pulse at the center of the black circle. It glowed for exactly 10 seconds, then vanished. Then it appeared in the southern bowl. Same light, same timing, then back to the north. The rhythm repeated, bouncing from pole to pole like a message passing between two hands. The pulses stayed steady for one full day. Then, just before dawn on the planet's side, both bowls lit up at once. The light reached high into the sky, over 30 kilometers up, tall enough to pierce the low clouds. The beams were clean and straight, narrow like pencils of red fire. They didn't move, They didn't flash. They just stood there, glowing. The shelf responded next. The ground trembled slightly, only by 2 centimeters, but enough for James Webb to detect the shift. The 7 plates lifted again, slowly, like lids of ancient boxes opening one more time. The glow returned to the long line that split the shelf, rising from dull orange to bright red. Then, in the center, something new appeared. A circle. It glowed with a deep blue light, like the color of ice in deep caves. It wasn't big, maybe 10 meters across, but it hovered just above the surface, spinning in place without touching the ground. The line beneath it connected directly to the triangle on the tower. The colors clashed, blue on red, but they didn't mix. They held their shape. One old, one new, one from Earth, one from here. The beams from the poles began to shift. They didn't move side to side, but their color changed, from red to yellow, then yellow to white. As the beams grew brighter, the symbols on the tower flared again. Not the old spirals, not the triangle, but something else. Lines. Dozens of them. Not curved, not smooth. Straight, sharp, clean. They formed a grid across the tower's surface, each line lighting up in order. North to south, east to west. As each one appeared, the blue circle on the shelf spun faster. It rose higher. 10 meters, then 20, then 50. It spun faster, the blue light turning into a blur. The clouds began to react. They spun too, forming wide rings above the shelf, as if being pulled into the motion of the circle below. The air thinned around them, opening a hole in the sky almost 500 kilometers wide. The planet's red star poured light into the hole, touching the tower for the first time since it had risen. That's when the tower blinked. Not once, but many times. The light inside it flashed in short, sharp bursts. First 2, then 4, then 8, then 16. A pattern, a doubling. The pulses matched a binary sequence. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Then nothing. The light went out. The tower stopped blinking. The blue circle froze. And for a full minute, the planet went completely dark. Then the shelf cracked open. Not fully, not wide, just a line, splitting down the center of the blue circle. From the crack, a new light appeared. White, pure, blinding. But only for 1 second. Then it vanished. The circle collapsed. The towers dimmed. The beams at the poles faded to black. The 7 plates slammed shut. The planet, once again, was still. But Earth had seen it all. And it knew, without question, what had just happened. A door had opened, and something had stepped through. The crack on the shelf was gone, sealed, vanished like it had never opened. But something had changed. The blue circle was gone too. No spinning, no light, just smooth ground again. The tower stood cold and dark, not glowing, not blinking. The clouds above the shelf moved slower now, drifting in lazy circles like fog losing its way. The beams from the poles had stopped. The bowls no longer pulsed. From far away, the planet looked dead again. Still, silent. But every sensor watching it said the same thing. It wasn't. James Webb found heat. Not near the shelf, not near the cores, somewhere else, south of the equator, in a place where there had been nothing before. A single, small dot of warmth, about the size of a school bus. It sat on flat ground, surrounded by thick cloud cover. But it wasn't natural. The heat didn't spread. It didn't fade. It stayed tight and solid, like a machine keeping itself alive. Every 4 minutes, it gave off a sharp pulse, not of light, but of gravity. Small waves that made the dust in the upper clouds tremble. Not strong enough to shift air, but enough for Webb to catch. The pulses were shaped. Each one rose fast, held steady for 2 seconds, then dropped in a sharp line. That pattern repeated again and again. Fast rise, flat top, sudden fall. It was the same shape seen during the first signals sent from Earth the same curve used in Explorer 8's transmissions. The triangle had been more than a memory. It had been a key. Whatever had come through the crack now sat in this place. Not moving, not spreading, just existing. The scientists couldn't call it life. It wasn't breathing, eating, or growing, but it was active. And most important, it was new. This dot of heat hadn't existed before the shelf opened. There was no record of it, no trace. And now, it was here. A probe, a messenger, a test. Some thought it might be a seed, waiting to grow. Others believed it was a recorder, made to watch Earth and send something back. But no one knew for sure. More tools were pointed toward the heat dot. Satellites orbiting Earth focused their signals. Radio telescopes aimed long beams of sound across space. And someone decided to speak again. A second message. This one was different from the first. It didn't use Earth's languages. It didn't use math. It used rhythm. 7 pulses. Then silence. Then 7 more. Each pulse was shaped like the heat dot's waves. The message was sent once an hour, every hour for 3 days. On the 4th day, the dot responded. Not with heat, not with light, but with shadow. A new shape appeared beside the heat dot. Low and flat, barely raised off the ground, but wide. Over 30 meters across. A circle, just like the blue ring from the shelf. But this one was black, not glowing, just empty. Even in thermal images, it gave off nothing. Worse than cold. It was invisible to every tool. The dot stayed next to the circle. Then it moved. It didn't roll or float. It jumped. From one side of the circle to the other, in less than 1 second. It vanished from one place, reappeared in another. Then it jumped again, and again, always in straight lines, always in even time. 3 jumps, then silence. Then the dot disappeared. Gone. No heat, no gravity, no signal. Only the black circle remained. James Webb watched for days. The circle never changed, but something else did. The shelf. It began to shake again. Not hard, not loud, just enough for the dust to lift off the ground. Then the tower lit up. Not the whole thing, just the triangle symbol at the base. It glowed bright red for 5 seconds. Then it blinked once. Then again. 7 times. 7 red blinks. Then it stopped, and the planet went quiet again. But not Earth. On the same day, the same minute, a pulse was picked up in Earth's orbit. A signal, very weak, almost lost in the noise. But when cleaned up, it showed something familiar. The triangle. The same shape that had glowed on the tower. Somehow, the signal had arrived across 90 light-years in less than a day. Impossible, unless it hadn't traveled through space. Unless something had brought it here. The scientists froze. If the triangle symbol was now on Earth, transmitted, not copied, then the thing that had appeared on the planet had sent it. And if it could do that, it could send other things too. What had come through the crack? Where had it gone? And most important, was it now here? The triangle symbol kept pulsing, 7 times every hour, like a heartbeat made of red light. The tower hadn't moved, but something behind it had. A low hum now buzzed in the ground near the shelf, soft at first, like air moving through stone. James Webb caught small waves of heat rising from the far side of the shelf, waves shaped like long fingers spreading outward. The rest of the planet stayed still. The cores were quiet. The poles gave off no more light. But this new heat, was not part of the old system. It was something fresh, something building. On Earth, the signal with the triangle shape had been received again, not from deep space, from inside the Earth's orbit. This time, it came with something extra. A line. One glowing red line. Bent at the tip. Curling like a hook. When placed over a map of Earth's satellites, it pointed toward one specific path, an old polar satellite, long dead, drifting in silence. The triangle pointed to its orbit. The hook pointed to its current location, and then the signal stopped. People watched the sky, not scientists, not engineers, regular people, sky watchers, hobbyists, children, and they began to report something strange. Stars blinking, not twinkling like they always do, but going out, one by one, just for a second, then returning. The pattern didn't make sense. It moved across the sky in a wave, east to west, like something invisible was moving in front of the stars, just enough to block the light. Then came the black drop. It was caught by accident. An astronomer in Argentina was filming the moon when a dark circle moved across it. Not a shadow, not a bird, a smooth, silent dot, perfectly round, gliding across the moon's surface. The video was shared online. Then another came, and another, from Mexico, from Spain, from New Zealand. Each showed the same shape, a black circle passing in front of stars or the moon, moving too fast for a balloon, too smooth for a rock, too perfect to ignore. Scientists finally confirmed it. Something was above Earth. Not one object, several. And they looked like the black circle that had appeared next to the heat dot on the alien planet. They didn't give off heat. They didn't reflect radar. They weren't even picked up by telescopes unless they crossed in front of a light source. But when they did, they always showed the same size, 27 meters across. Always the same speed. Always the same curve. Then, on the 15th day, they stopped moving. 7 of them, parked in orbit, not spinning, just floating. One above each continent. Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America, Australia, Antarctica. They stayed silent. But then, just before sunrise in Asia, the triangle signal appeared again. This time, from the ground. A small radio telescope in Indonesia picked up the same pattern. 7 red pulses, followed by silence, then a tone. Low, steady, 4 seconds long. The signal repeated every hour, but it wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from somewhere on Earth. At first, people thought it might be a satellite bouncing the signal down. But then the same signal was picked up deep in the Amazon jungle. Then again, from a point in the Australian outback. Then from a mountain in Norway. Each location matched one of the 7 places beneath the orbiting black circles. Something had arrived. It hadn't just sent a message. It had landed. The fear began to grow. Governments didn't speak about it. News stations stayed quiet. But the scientists kept digging. They traced the pulse patterns from the alien planet again. They matched the blue ring, the shelf's crack, the way the heat dot moved. Every shape had meaning. Every shape was tied to 7. 7 lights, 7 steps, 7 landings. The world held its breath. Then, something moved. In the desert of Australia, just after midnight, a weather satellite picked up a sudden drop in temperature, nearly 40 degrees in under 10 seconds. A local observatory pointed its cameras at the area. What they saw was not possible. The sand was rising. Not blowing, not tossed, but lifting in a slow, spiraling column. At the center of the spiral was a black circle, spinning gently, floating just above the ground. Then, from its center, a beam of light shot downward. It wasn't bright, it was soft, white and silver like moonlight seen through water. The sand stopped rising. The circle stopped spinning. And then, a shadow stepped out. It didn't walk. It didn't glide. It grew. 1 second, it was a dot. The next, it was tall, over 3 meters, thin and long, with no clear face or hands. Just lines, glowing red lines that moved under the skin like heat under glass. It stood still, silent, alone. Then it turned toward the camera, and the feed went dark. All signals from that region were cut. No video, no data, just silence. Then, 30 minutes later, the same happened in the Amazon, then Norway, then one by one, across every continent, 7 appearances, 7 black circles. 7 shadows stepping through the light, each one shaped the same, each one bringing the red lines with them. The tower on the alien planet blinked once more. One flash, then dark, and the skies above Earth were no longer empty. The shadows didn't move quickly. They stood still at first, like statues made of smoke, each one waiting beside the black circle that had opened in its part of the world. People didn't know what to do. Some ran, some filmed, some just stared. But the figures didn't come closer. They didn't talk. They didn't wave. They just stood there, tall and silent, with red lines crawling under their skin like lava under glass. Every few minutes, one would blink, a flash of red light that pulsed across its body in a slow ripple, like a heart beating once every few minutes. In the Australian outback, the figure stood beside a dry riverbed, its feet never touching the ground. Heat sensors said the air around it was freezing cold, even though the desert sun was high. No wind, no sound, just the strange shape glowing in the stillness. The same thing was seen in the Amazon jungle, where trees bent back slightly, pushed away by invisible force. In Norway, the figure stood on the ice, but it left no footprints. It didn't melt the snow. It didn't make steam. It just was. People sent drones to fly close. The drones didn't return, not exploded, not shot down, just gone. As soon as they passed into the thin zone of air around the figure, their signals vanished. No data, no sound, no video. The feed would go black. Every time. But people kept watching. Then, on the 7th day after the landing, all 7 figures moved at once. Not far, just a few steps. They turned. Each one rotated toward a different direction. North, east, west, and so on, as if listening to something far away. Then they all lifted one arm. Slowly, deliberately, not pointing, just raising it to the side. And then the black circles began to change. The edges of each circle grew brighter, glowing with soft red light, like embers in a fire. The light didn't flicker. It pulsed, slowly, once every 10 seconds. The center of each circle stayed dark, but above them, the air rippled, as if something large and invisible was pushing against it from the other side. The figures didn't move again, but the world did. Seismic sensors under each landing site picked up soft tremors, small even, like the rhythm of breathing. Not from the ground below, but from something above. Something pressing down. At the same time, the tower on the alien planet began to glow again. The triangle reappeared, shining with bright, steady red light. But this time, it was upside down. The point aimed at the ground. Above it, 7 new lines appeared. Not spirals, not curves, straight lines, and they didn't stay on the tower. They floated above it, like lasers in the air, forming a shape like a star with 7 sharp points. Then, slowly, the tower started to sink. Not collapse, not break, just lower itself, as if returning underground. The shelf cracked along its edges. Steam poured out, and the planet trembled. James Webb captured all of it. Every flicker, every change in heat, every shift in light. It saw the tower sink fully into the shelf. It saw the glowing red star shape remain floating above the crack. Then, the crack sealed. The tower was gone, but the shape stayed in the sky above it. A signal, a marker. Earth scientists didn't understand. They tracked the red shape and the 7 blinking figures across the globe. They charted the black circles. They watched the skies. Then the first dream came. It was reported by a small girl in Argentina. She said she saw the triangle in her sleep. She drew it with crayons on the wall. Then her mother had the same dream. Then her teacher. Then 10 more people in the town. Soon, reports came from around the world. People dreaming of the same shape. Not just the triangle, but the red star with 7 points. And then they began to hear something. A sound. Not during the day. only in dreams. It was soft, like humming, like someone blowing across the top of a bottle. And it came with a picture, always the same, of the red star floating in a dark sky. The dreams grew stronger. People who had never met described the same scenes. Standing in a field, looking up, the red shape above them, always silent, always watching, until one night, someone dreamed more. A boy in Kenya described walking forward in the dream. He walked toward the red star, and when he reached it, he saw something inside it. A figure, a shape like the ones on Earth, but this one was smaller, bent, almost human. It raised one hand and touched the boy's chest. He said he felt warm. He said it whispered one word. Again, no one knew what it meant. But the dreams didn't stop. They spread. Even people who had never heard of the landings began to draw the triangle, write the star, hear the hum, and somewhere far away, above a red, silent planet, the last light blinked, 7 times. Then darkness. The planet was quiet, but Earth was just beginning to listen. The dreams didn't stop. They deepened. Night after night, more people began to feel them. Not just see or hear, but feel. They would wake up sweating, or shaking, or crying, not sure why. Many said the same thing. It felt like something was trying to remember through them. Some people forgot what they saw by morning, but they kept the feeling. A strange weight in their chest. A whisper in their ear. Some said it felt like grief. Others said it felt like someone knocking on a locked door inside their head. Scientists began to collect the dreams. They opened online forums, dream logs, message boards. And in the middle of all the different words and drawings, one thing kept coming back. A circle inside a triangle, inside a star. Always the same shape. Always the same order. Some people drew it. Some just described it. One little boy in India used bottle caps and sticks to build it in the dirt. When asked what it meant, he only said, "It's the door." A team at a university took all the shapes people reported and layered them together. Every shape fit perfectly. The triangle, the star, the circle. Each shape had lines that lined up exactly. And when they overlaid those lines on a global map, it pointed to one place, the Pacific Ocean, a point near the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the Earth. That's where they sent the signal. Not a loud one, just a soft tone, a simple hum, like the one people had heard in their sleep. They aimed it straight down into the ocean trench. Just a test, just to see. The water answered. First, the sea level dropped by 2 inches along a perfect circle, over 500 kilometers wide. Then, a column of bubbles rose from the trench floor. Clear, straight, moving faster than any natural gas release. Submarines were sent to the edge. They didn't go deep, just far enough to see the start of the plume. It wasn't gas. It was light. Soft red light, rising like smoke. Slow and smooth, not stopping. The water didn't boil. The pressure didn't break. The light kept climbing, forming a thin, glowing thread straight up through the sea. When it reached the surface, it stopped. Then it split into 7 glowing rings, each one spinning slowly in the air just above the water. The same star shape people had seen in their dreams. And then, the hum began. Not from speakers, from the air itself, a deep, steady tone that filled the sky over the Pacific. Planes flying above it had to reroute. Birds changed course. Whales swam toward it. The sound couldn't be measured. No single pitch, no clear origin, just vibration. The hum traveled through the ground, through walls, through people, and with it came the feeling again. Like a door opening, the 7 figures around the world lifted their arms once more. The black circles behind them glowed red. Then, one by one, the figures walked into the light. They didn't vanish. They didn't explode. They merged, folding into the glow like ink into water. Each one left behind a small mark on the ground. A triangle, burned into rock or ice. or sand. Then silence. The black circles faded. The marks remained, and the hum stopped. People waited. Nothing came. No new lights. No more dreams. But something had changed. The stars looked different, only slightly, just a flicker. But across the world, astronomers saw it, stars shifting out of place by fractions of a second. Not a natural shake, not a system error, a real, measurable drift, as if something behind the stars was pulling them. The triangle marks on Earth began to warm, very slowly, half a degree each day. They glowed faintly, but only at night. The triangle on the alien planet, long gone into the shelf, blinked one last time, this time white, not red. And then the pulse came, a final signal, but not from the planet. From inside Earth, the sensors caught it near the trench, deep beneath the crust. A rhythmic beat, 7 pulses, then silence, then again. It matched the shape people had dreamed. It matched the beat of the shelf tower. It matched the pattern of the orbiting black circles. It was not noise. It was memory. It was the past, rising again. And whatever had been waiting there, under our oceans, inside our planet, behind our stars, was no longer asleep. Dawn came slow, like a pale ribbon on the edge of the world. People stepped outside and listened for the hum. The air was quiet. No red lights over the sea, no shadows in fields. Only the triangle marks remained, faint and warm like coals under ash. At night they glowed. By day they looked like chalk set in stone. Birds landed. Dogs were calm. At the trench, the ocean lay flat as glass. Ships kept a wide circle at the edge of the no-sail zone. The red thread was gone, but the water still turned in a slow ring, as if something moved below. Every 13 minutes a pulse rose. 7 beats, then silence. The sea did not break. It held. James Webb kept its golden eyes on the red star and the broken planet. But the planet gave nothing new. No tower, no beams, just clouds over ground. Even the 7 cores were dim. It felt like a book had been closed and put away. Still, the telescope watched, because Earth had learned that quiet can be a kind of talking. On a hill above a small city, a girl drew in dust with a stick. Circle, triangle, star. She pressed harder and added a line through the center. Her father asked what it was. A lock, she said. What does it open? Maybe us. Across the world, small changes began. Near each mark, seeds sprouted faster. Bees built 7 cells around one. A radio in Brazil, long broken, clicked on and played one low tone for 7 seconds, then died again. In a quiet lab, a team replayed the signal Earth had sent. The 4-minute pulse, the 7-point rhythm. They shaped a new reply, simple and gentle, more like a whisper than a shout. Not words, not math. A heartbeat, 1 long breath in, 1 long breath out, then a soft tap. They sent it down into the trench. They sent it toward the red star too, even though the light would take 90 years. The trench answered first. The ring sped up a little. Bubbles rose like silver beads. The sea glowed again, not red, but a calm pale blue. The glow did not climb into air. It pooled within the water. Robots swam to the edge and returned. Their cameras showed fields of smooth stone far below, etched with shallow lines like writing worn by time. In the center sat a round door the size of a house, set flush in rock dark as night. A boy in Kenya woke from another dream. He stood on the shelf under a red sky, but the tower was gone. A mirror as wide as a lake lay there. He looked in and did not see his face. He saw a map of nerves and roads and rivers. He touched the glass, and it whispered that the shortest bridge between far things is not always a line. By noon, the marks were bright enough to cast a shadow. People brought flowers to the edges. Some prayed. Some sang. A man who fixed bikes set a bent wheel on one mark, and the metal straightened. as if warmed by hands. Scientists argued in soft voices. Was this evolution gone wrong? A world that burned itself and learned to speak with ruins? Or evolution sideways, where life left bodies and became place and pattern? They set pictures of hot moons beside the shelf and the trench and asked what kind of future is safe for minds. Near sunset, the sky over the Pacific darkened early. Stars pricked through before they should. Then the hum returned, not loud, just felt. It moved through skin like a bass string plucked far away. The blue glow deepened. The round door at the bottom of the sea turned once. Not open, not yet, but ready. On every screen, a simple sign appeared, even on machines not plugged in. Not words, not a voice. A shape. 7 dots in a ring and 1 dot in the center. Under it, a small arrow pointed inward. People stared. Some touched the glass. Some touched their own chests, where the boy said the figure touched him in the dream. Night settled. The wind went quiet. A fox stepped across a triangle mark. In a hospital, a nurse held an old woman's hand as she slept. The woman's breath matched the trench pulses, 7 shallow, 1 deep. At last a thing happened that nobody owned and nobody stopped. A child by the sea walked to the water with a paper boat. She drew the circle, the triangle, and the star on the boat and set it on a wave. The boat drifted toward the pale glow where the ocean breathed. On every coast, in every language, other children did the same. Paper boats with the same small sign moved out on little tides. Far above, James Webb watched a faint change on the red world. One cloud opened like an eye, and for a second, a point on the shelf winked white, then closed. It might have been noise. It might have been a goodbye. The telescope saved the frame. Morning came back. The marks cooled a little, but they did not fade. People went to work and school. They drove, cooked, and read, but they looked more at the sky and the sea and at each other. When night returned, the dreams came too, softer now, like pages turning. The red star waited, patient. The blue door waited below, near. Maybe evolution went horribly wrong on that other world. Maybe it burned and broke until only stone could think. Or maybe it learned the oldest trick of all, how to keep a light alive by passing it on. We do not know yet. We only know this. The knock is gentle, the key may be small, and the lock might be inside us. We stand at the water's edge and hold our breath, and the world, our one small world, listens back.